Hi, friends. Welcome. Welcome to tonight's webinar. We're so glad you're here. We're talking about what colleges are looking for this year, 2026, and how can you stand out in this process. We've called it 7 ways to stand out, but I actually think we're going to get to more than 7 ways to stand out. I'm your host. I'm Ethan, the college essay guy, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this process, but so do my co-presenters today. Tillie, Tom, maybe we'll start with you, Tillie. Will you just introduce yourself, tell folks, give a little context for who you
Sure.
are and what you're about in this process?
Of course. Hi, everyone. We've got such a great crew here this afternoon. It's afternoon where I am in Portland, Oregon. And this is probably year 16 in the land of admissions and counseling. So I've sort of seen every piece of this process. I've done admissions, most recently read applications for USC, was a college counselor in the school setting at a private school in the San Francisco Bay Area for many years, have also worked in Canada and Thailand, became an independent college counselor with my own practice, and actually have been doing workshops for College Essay Guy for the last 3 years. So you may have seen me in your school, which has been fantastic, and then transitioned to the full-time team just a couple weeks ago. So woohoo! So I'm a college counselor here at College Essay Guy, and I'll also be doing content like this. So sharing information, helping with webinars, workshops, all the good stuff. You might see me on social media, so follow along. But I love being here, and these are two fantastic gents that I get to share this time with, in addition to all of you. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom. Similar to Tilly, I have a background in college admissions and college counseling. I've been at College Essay Guy full time for 4 years now. So, doing a lot of sessions like this. You may have seen me before on one. If you're new to our wonderful family, welcome. And yeah, I spent 6 years working in admissions at Holy Cross, which is my alma mater, and Pomona College combined. So, definitely know what it's like to read a lot of applications. And so I'm trying to equip you all with some tips to stand out and empower yourselves as you embark on this wonderful journey. So glad you're here.
I love the word embark. That feels like kind of epic. Not to miss our beautiful title slide that Tom created. So here it is, our title officially. Yes, it's being recorded. We're totally going to send you the recording and the resources. If you got questions, throw them into the Q&A. And at the end, we're going to give away 3 copies of this book I wrote called College Admission Essentials. And we will explain to you how to get that shortly. Tillie's going to start us off talking about some trends from the current admission cycle, kick it over to me to talk about what do colleges look at when it comes to when making their decisions. Then we're going to do a little self-assessment moment. We're going to take a little our college admission readiness quiz. If you fill it out, you'll get an email with like your results, and that's how you get in the drawing for the books at the end. Then we're going to get into the specifics. Tom's going to talk about how do you know which classes to take. I'm going to talk about positive character attributes, which we'll explain when we get to it. Tillie's going to talk about demonstrated interest, summer, letters of rec. We're going to get into all the things pretty much. And here are our lovely faces. Okay. Quick side note, if you don't know anything about College Essay Guy, we're all about ease, purpose, and joy in this process. Last year, we had over 4 million people on the website, students interacting with our YouTube videos. We're on Instagram a lot. We give away tons of free resources. You pretty much Google anything related to college admissions. We've got pay what you can courses that we do over the summer. We've got a counselor training program that's coming up for counselors who are interested in up-leveling their skills with a Z. I don't know why. And then our Match Letters program, we work with hundreds of students each year, providing free one-on-one college application support, pairing them with amazing counselors. And we also do essay and application support if you're interested. Okay, Tillie, do you want to be screen sharing or do you want me to be your Vanna White? I'm totally happy to be your Vanna White. It's
It's
not
up
being
to
funny.
you.
I'm
Up to
going to be your
you.
Vanna White. A
Okay.
reference that only 40% of our crowd will get, but
I've always wanted a Vanna White. Okay, so we want you to understand trends because this is honestly, I mean, we think of higher ed sometimes as slow moving, but the admission process really does ebb and flow. So we want you to kind of understand what's happening right now, what's going to be relevant for you as you move through this process. So let's think about AI. We'll just rip that band-aid right off. It's not all to be scared of, but we know that colleges are more aware of students using AI. So even on our podcast most recently, we heard from our friend Risa at Harvey Mudd, who was like, "Yeah, we can tell." But we know that offices are being trained for how to recognize it. But a question that we like to pose to our students and families here, right, is if someone were to ask you, how are you using AI in your essays, right? How are you using them? If RISA asked you that, if the dean of, the one of you who's so excited about NYU, if they were to ask you that, what would make you proud to respond, right? How would you want to respond? And what we're also seeing here, right, if AI is in use, means you got to lean into the specificity of your application, explore your identity, what you want to share about yourself and your point of view, and we're going to get into that later today. We also know that a lot of colleges are using AI in different ways to review applications. Virginia Tech is one recent example that we've been very clear about how they're using it. So they are using AI as a second reader for essays, right? And then if there's a big discrepancy, they bring a second human in to sort of join that conversation. So we know that it's being implemented, but it's mostly to help with their workflow. They're getting so many applications, and we are fairly certain, right? In none of our research are we seeing that they're letting machines make the final decisions. I don't think we're close to that, and I don't think we're going to get close to that. So we can take that right off of our shoulders in terms of worry in that regard. Okay, Vanna, next, please. Okay, so let's think. We wanted to tell you too about the volume and the pretty significant increase, right, in how many people are applying to the most selective colleges in the U.S., particularly those early action and early decision deadlines. We are seeing more and more, even public universities that are making the move to having early deadlines, which we typically haven't seen. Michigan is a big one, right, on the heels of places like UVA and UConn. We saw UT Austin make the decision to have an early action round, and then USC was in the news just a week or two ago that they are expanding their early decision deadlines beyond just their business school. So important, to you to understand that you really should look at that data. You can't always assume, right, that early decision means it's going to be a whole lot easier for you. But we do want to say too, for those of you who aren't necessarily STEM oriented, right, if you think you're going to go into something else, we're seeing a little bit more generosity there still in those early decision pools, particularly if you have little or no financial need and you are not necessarily STEM focused. It's still looking fairly generous. So there's that too. But because we're seeing these big increases, particularly in STEM and business, kind of the domino effect is that colleges are being more explicit. So we're seeing this on websites. They are declaring these things that they want to see evidence that your activities, your academics, your leadership align with the major that you want to do. And in previous years, it's been a little bit more well-rounded and open, but because there's so much interest in these areas, we want you to ask yourselves, right, do your activities and courses align strongly with this intended major? And if they're not really there, particularly if you're looking at these really selective schools, you might want to reconsider it. Have conversations with your counselors around what is the best thing for you to pursue. And then we are seeing too, right, this surge in applications in the South. South is where it's at. And this is drawn from the Common App Trends Report. But since 2018, folks, it's been a 30% increase in applications from northern states to the South. So that's significant, right? And we think it's for a variety of reasons. But our research is showing that there's a great interest in the culture, the sports, the Greek life, the sunny weather, right, particularly post-COVID. And probably for those of you in those East Coast storms. We hope you're being safe out there. But we are seeing an increase, obviously, in those applications, but even universities having folks who are working outside of the region to recruit. So even for, I'm thinking about schools like Tennessee, where in previous years that might have been quite a generous school for students, that I'm working with, maybe coming from the West Coast or even other places. But really, particularly in business and STEM, we're seeing a shifting of the tides. So want you to be mindful when you're building your list that we're seeing those shifts. You can see admission rates and how those things have shifted. Also be mindful about financial aid at these publics. May not be as generous, particularly if you're coming out of state. Doesn't mean you can't apply to these spots, right? But maybe they move from a likely to a target on the list. So be mindful of that. Okay, last slide for info. So let's dig a little bit into standardized testing. We are going to talk about that in a second, but I want everyone to know, this is a piece of the puzzle that can be very stressful, even though it's just a piece of the pie. We are seeing a return from many selective colleges, really all but Columbia at this point, to testing, right? 11 of the top 15 schools in the country have returned to this policy, which then means we're seeing an increase in students submitting testing, about 11% increase in the last cycle. And we're seeing 4 different types now. So we've got testing required, which makes sense. We've got test optional, which I'm going to talk about in a second. We've got test free or blind, which is like the UCs who are saying we're not going to look at it even if you submit it for these purposes. And then we've got test flexible. So a place like Yale, for example, is flexible in that you may not have to submit your SAT or ACT, but APs, right? So some schools are trending in that direction. A great resource for you because, folks, over 2,000 schools, so the vast majority, are still test optional. Woo, right? Doesn't mean it's test neutral. You still got to be a little strategic about it, but you can use a terrific resource, which is fairtest.org, right? That's actually going to show you this long, comprehensive list of schools, their testing policies. Maybe it's just for out-of-state folks, or it's the percentage of students enrolled without any scores, so you can see how important it is to those schools. And I'm seeing now that I said Scouts instead of SCOTUS. So that should be our SCOTUS decision. Yes, the Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you for that correction. So final piece here to be mindful of, right, is we've had a couple of cycles now since that decision came out, which was that race-based admissions was deemed unconstitutional. But despite that, we are still seeing that the most common prompts for supplemental essays still have to do with your identity. So we spent a very long time analyzing 300 or more essay prompts, and Ethan has a great video on it if you want some more insights. But what's important to know there is questions like, based on your experiences, what will you contribute to our campus community, are still the most popular, right, that we're seeing across the board. And it's sort of a combination of your identity and obviously what you're going to bring to campus. But what that means is that diverse perspectives and identities are still paramount and very important to colleges, right? Even if kind of the language has shifted, which we have seen, they really do want to understand your character. They want deeper applicant context. They want to really understand who you are, your skills, your qualities. And today we're going to dig deep into how you really can demonstrate that in these applications. Okay, here we go.
Great. Thanks. I want to show a spreadsheet, heads up spreadsheet coming, because if you're like, did you really do that? The answer is yes. So I looked at these hundreds of prompts from all these different schools, and yeah, the identity, what would you contribute, came up a ton. There was also among those prompts, like more than 100 could have potentially been an identity or what will you contribute. There are still around 33 that I would qualify as like diversity prompts. Some of the other ones that were popular, navigating differences, are popular supplemental essay prompts. But it's way too early to talk about supplemental essays, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Mostly, look at this, we fixed it. It's now a SCOTUS decision. But what do colleges care about most? Well, our friends at NACAC, the National Association of College Admission Counselors, puts out a report, not every year. So the most recent one they did was in 2023, but we did a 9-part podcast series, Tom and I, on this in year before last. And we walked through all of the different pieces of this. So you're going to get the short version today, but essentially they care about your grades. That's the top right here. They care about something called positive character attributes, which we'll explain in about 10 minutes. They care about your essays. They care about demonstrated interest, rec letters, extracurricular activities, and then some of them care about rank. I mean, you can see the numbers here. It's not all of them. Test scores probably bumped up slightly, but not like a ton because it was, again, as Tillie pointed out, the majority of schools are still test optional. And then some of these other things are lower down. We showed this to you because I think sometimes students worry, like they fret about an interview. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't get an interview. Does that mean I'm not getting in? Not necessarily. It kind of depends on the school and how much, like how they value it. So these are the elements that we're going to talk about. But before we do, we want to help you figure out, where do you stand today? So auto magically happening in the chat, not actually, Diana's actually posting them. We're going to post 3 different versions of this. So there's a student version, there's a parent version, and we even have a counselor version of this. And this is your College Admission Readiness Quiz. For counselors, it's called a College Competencies Quiz. But I want to just spend like 3 minutes walking through this together in screen share mode. Parents do your version, students do your version. You'll get an email back with a nice little thing that shows you your score, like how ready are you, or how ready is your family, feeling for the process. And we're going to walk through in just a couple minutes each aspect of the process. So hit the button next, if you would. Let me just make sure these are in the chat. Actually, before I go rushing through it. Oh, there we go. Diana, look at that. It's there. So let me give you a second to find this. Find either the student, parent, or counselor one. You'll be able to know by the URL. It should say student, counselor, or parent up at the top. Okay. No matter what your role is, and if you're none of these things, just, I don't know, pick one. How would you rate your clarity on your primary values that drive your decision making? As a student, as a parent, as a counselor. If you're not sure what your core values are, you might be on the lower end. If you're like, I know my values, I don't know, don't threaten me. I know what my values are, and then you might be on the higher end. So what's your sense there? So I'm going to answer this as a 17-year-old. I think as a 17-year-old, I had a pretty good sense of my core values. I'm going to go 7 on this. I'm not going to be 7 on all of these. All right, goals. How would you rate, this is for students, your clarity on your goals for the college admission process? And are they SMART? Which is to say, are your goals specific, measurable, achievable, relevant? Time-bound? Yes, they're going to be time-bound because, it's when applications are due. If you're not clear on your goals, you might be lower down here. If you're like, yes, I know what my goals are and they are achievable. That's the big one. The big gotcha for this one is your goal for the college admission process achievable? Take a second to check in. I don't think I had specific goals. I wanted to leave Miami where I was living. So I would give myself a 5 here, maybe a 4. I think it was a 4. High school course planning. How well are you able to pick courses based on what colleges would like to see? So if you're a student, I don't know. I'm not sure what colleges want to see. Or 8 to 10. I really know what colleges most want, and I feel confident in selecting best fit courses to maximize my college options. I had no idea what colleges were looking for, almost none. I'm going to give myself a 3 on this one as a 17-year-old. Extracurriculars and summer planning. Again, we're going to get into each of these. We're going to give tips on all of them. We're just doing a pre-shot here. I don't know what my extracurriculars and summer experiences, what are even available. That was me. I was going to work a job, and that was kind of all I knew. Or maybe you have extensive up-to-date knowledge of extracurricular and summer opportunities and how to pick them based on your values and goals. I knew I was going to get a job, and that was pretty much it. So 4, maybe 3. I had no idea about extracurriculars. College list building. Are you on the lower end where you're like, I'm not sure where to even start with list building? Or are you more like, I am a veritable walking encyclopedia of college knowledge because I've visited tons of schools? Now, this is kind of wild. This is more like counselors visiting 40 plus schools. I don't expect students to have done this. So I don't know. I think I need to edit this one actually. Maybe you have visited a few. I did not know what colleges are available to me. I was going to apply in-state to Florida schools, and my dad's alma mater, North Carolina, and Harvard and Northwestern, and that was it. So I'm giving myself a 3 here again. Standardized testing. Maybe you're like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know when it's even happening. What is standardized testing? Maybe you're on the lower end, or maybe you're like, you know what? I've already got this. I've got my plan in place. I've got my goal score that I want to get. Or maybe you've taken it and you're like already, on that track. So maybe you're like locked in at 10. Give yourself a score. Nobody else is going to see the score but you, by the way. I'm going to give myself a 3 again because I didn't even know when the test was happening. Personal statement. Maybe you're on the lower end. I don't even know what a personal statement is or what colleges are looking for. Higher end. Hey, I've got a really good sense and I feel confident in my ability to find an uncommon topic and write about myself. I've got practice in the creative nonfiction genre. I think I'm going to give myself a 6 here because I had some sense of what might work and I was a pretty good writer. Supplemental essays. These are the essays in addition to your personal statement. Are you somebody who's like, I know what all of those are, and I've seen college essay guys guides. I know where they are. We'll share them with you, don't worry. Or are you like, I have no idea what's required or what schools are looking for? As a 17-year-old, I'm gonna go lower. I'm gonna go 1 because I really, really didn't know. I wouldn't even be able to guess what colleges were looking for supplemental essays. Recommendation letters. Are you on this end where you know which, what your recommendation letter strategy is in terms of which teachers you're going to ask? what you can equip your counselors with, what information? Or are you like, wait, we have to do recommendation letters? I would have been in the wait, we have to do recommendation letters category. So I'm gonna give myself a 2. Paying for college. I'm not sure what scholarships are available or how financial aid works. Or you're like, yep, got it, locked in. I understand this whole process. Or my family and I isn't gonna have to worry about, this. If so, great for you. I think I was kind of I knew I was gonna get scholarships and apply for them. So I think I was probably like in the 4, maybe 3. And then how would you rate the degree to which you are on the same page? Now, this is for different people as your parents. So if you're a student, are you on the same page as your parents? If you're a parent, are you on the same page as your student? If you're very much aligned, yes, I'm certain we know we want the same things, 10. If you're like, I don't know, maybe lower. My parents just wanted me to be happy. I would say it was like a 6. They didn't really get too involved with my process. And then finally, your support system. Are you connected with, if you're a counselor, with colleagues? If you're a student, are you connected with your school counselor? How has the engagement been? You're emailing them every week. Maybe it's at the higher end. I don't have regular contact with my counselor. Maybe it's on the lower end. I would say it was a 3 for me. Once you hit next, if you would like this email to you, put your name, email address, and we'll send it to you. Okay, let's get into each of these elements, starting with which classes to take. Tom, over to you. And can I let you screen share here? Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Great. Sweet.
Let me pull this up and I'm good. I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
Sweet. I feel that.
So I'm talking about the most fun part of this presentation, your courses. Yay! All right. So maybe you don't all see these as the most fun part of this presentation, but as Ethan shared from the data that we have from NACAC, and Tillie and I can speak to this from working in admissions, your transcript in your classes are by and large the most important thing you can do to set yourself up for college success. And you have time, especially those of you who are juniors and you're wrestling with, hey, do I take AP Bio or an honors class that's offered by my school? This is the chance to make some strategic decisions about, how to maximize your college options. So if you take away anything from this webinar of a very practical takeaway that is applicable to all of you tuning in who are students, these are the 5 course, what we call solid academic course buckets that any admission officer, no matter what college or university that they look for, would be delighted to see on your transcript for all 4 years of high school. You may also decide that, say, for example, you want to double up in a history or a social studies class twice as a junior, so that way you have room in your schedule to take some STEM classes that you want as a senior. That's okay too, as long as you have 4 solid years of these 5 different categories on your transcript. I am not saying that not having these courses means you're never getting into college and your dreams are crushed. We live in a very binary society where it's the answer is yes or no, but as with everything, there's a lot more nuance and understanding that goes into how colleges evaluate the academic environments that you're coming from. Each of you are coming from a different high school with some of you may have a particular cool dual enrollment option that's available in your state. Some of you may go to an independent high school that has their own unique advanced curriculum. I used to work at a high school like that. I think maybe Tillie may have as well. I'm not sure what Athenian have for courses, but there are standard options of rigor that are out there. Things like advanced placement, AP classes, IB classes, international baccalaureate classes. Some of you may have an opportunity to take those. Others do not, based on what your high school provides. What's really important to know is that you want to try to take the courses that you see here on the screen as much as you're able to based on your interest and capacity and availability. But do know that there is some flexibility as to how colleges will assess these, right? So for example, languages is the one where I'd see a little bit more flexibility around this. There are maybe not every single student who applies to, say, a very highly selective college may not necessarily have 4 years of Spanish or 4 years of Latin or 4 years of Mandarin. And that's all right. But this is a good goal to aspire to if you want the widest amount of colleges available to you, because sometimes you may take what's up to your state, your state graduation requirements and just be like, hey, I'm going to take 3 years of math and call it a day. If your state asks for that, most colleges are going to want to see all 4 years of math, right? So this is the best thing that you can do to maximize your chances. So if this impacts and changes maybe the courses that you're planning on taking next year, I think that's a good thing, because this is advice that I'm giving to you pretty universally and like without much wavering. I am going to go into, and some of the slides, a lot of the slides are going to have this kind of like framework of don't sweat it and don't forget it. And what this means is there are a lot of things in the college admission process that people understandably fret and stress a lot about, especially when it comes to comparison to other students that are out there. If you're getting your information and advice from places like Reddit or College Confidential or any social media, any internet platform, you remember you're sifting through a lot of people's information that is A, unverified, and B, it's not really always as relevant to your particular situation, right? Because colleges read your transcript and your academics in the context of your high school. What that means, if you're not familiar with that term or phrase, is essentially it's not just this oversimplified, oh, we only read the weighted GPA or unweighted GPA, or if your school doesn't rank classes, too bad, your dreams are crushed, right? It's not that extreme. The admission officer takes a look at a document, what's called your school profile, alongside your transcript. Your school profile is a PDF document, I know, super high tech, that is sent along with your transcript to colleges to help that admission officer understand what courses are available here, what types of advanced rigor options are available here beyond the standard track. Are there unique programs or curricular options, like, you know, maybe immersive classes in partnership with a local business that you have the opportunity to take? I know at my high school, for example, we had a unique honors biology 2 class. It was an aquaculture class, where we actually had a fish tank, like a giant fish farming tank, and learned about fish farming. And that was basically something that most high schools didn't offer. It was kind of random. And to me, of course, I was like, this is a great class, you know, and really great to take. But now, reflecting and knowing what I do now, my high school also offered AP biology alongside honors biology. And if I was to try to maximize my chances or kind of help people understand all the course offerings that were available to me, I probably would have done a little bit more explaining around my courses in a section called the additional info section. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But this slide is really important because comparing yourself to a high school down the street that has 30 AP classes and my school only has 10, it's not worth your time and energy and your sweat. Literally don't sweat it, because it doesn't matter that they have those courses available to them. The person in admissions is not dinging you for not taking advantage of something that you don't have. That was a very grammatically strange sentence, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. Other things like, for example, school limits. You know, you may go to a school where the school administration or your college counseling team or whoever's in charge of, you know, helping keep sanity and balance a priority for the students may say, hey, we're not allowing our students to take more than 3 advanced classes per year, or maybe you can't take them until junior year. That does not hurt you. That only helps you keep balance a priority in your life to make sure that there's other things that you're cultivating in terms of your skills, qualities, values, and interests beyond your academic interests. Things to not forget about is, like I said before, balancing your interests with your capacity. That means essentially you don't want to overload with classes, even if you're like, hey, I know I really want to go to, you know, a bunch of highly selective colleges. And I'm looking at, you know, data that's available to me from my high school through something like Naviance scattergrams. Maybe your school uses Score or Maya Learning, where you can see applicants from your own individual high school and what types of advanced classes they took, maybe what GPA they had based on your own high school's individual grading scale and how they measure that. That data is actually really helpful to you to make informed decisions about what types of courses and academic threshold to try to reach for, depending on your college goals. But you have to remember your own realistic capacity. And it's not great if you're overloading on AP classes and then you're struggling to keep A's and B's in those classes, and then you start to slip into C territory. That's not going to really do you a lot of favors in the application overview process when it comes to academics. So you really want to pay attention to balancing your interests as well as your capacity. Other note that I would say is that don't forget it is sometimes there's a tendency, especially with what Tillie was saying earlier about this new wave in admissions about things like fit to major, right? There are many colleges, I'd say especially like larger public colleges, larger universities tend to really emphasize and hit this point home more than others. where they want to see evidence of classes that align with your academic and career interest. So it might make sense, say, if you're a pre-med student and you want to take AP, anatomy and physiology, if it's offered by your high school, instead of maybe a physics class, because to you, that's not as relevant to medicine. Well, people in college admissions still generally want to see those solid core academic courses like traditional, calculus as a goal to reach for math, if you're able to do that. And if you like math and can reach that and do well in it. Same thing with those core science classes, biology, chemistry, and physics, that little holy trinity, right? You can maybe augment and not replace those classes with things like a more pre-professional class, but try to be mindful of that. Same thing with things like, maybe a project lead the way class or an engineering class, right? You want to prioritize physics and math, the pure disciplines, over the more pre-professional ones, by and large, to have the widest range of college options. And then my last note with don't forget it's here when it comes to academics is if you do go to a high school that has some of the weird classes that I mentioned before or really unique offerings, like that aquaculture honors biology fish farming class that I took. By the way, we ate the fish at the end of class, or the end of the class at the end of the year. We cooked them in the dining hall. It was amazing. And that's something that you actually want to use your college application to advocate for you. This is something that, teachers and counselors can advocate for as well in their letters of recommendation. Tillie's going to talk about that in a second. But the additional information section is available in pretty much any application type that's out there. So whether you're using the Common Application, the University of California application, Questbridge application, there's usually a blank space for you to explain some of these course anomalies, or if you were sick or had, some really tough stuff happening in your personal life or family life that impacted your academics or course offerings. Or there's some, unique classes that are not so typical. So most admission officers really wouldn't know as much about them. That's a chance for you to spotlight and show those admission officers, this is why I took the courses that I did. This was an intentional choice. I really wanted to have this opportunity to gain XYZ skills, and my school offered this unique offering. Colleges are going to really see that and be like, wow, I love how the student took control of their education. It totally makes sense why they chose the courses that they did. And they're not left in the dark of, I wonder why they didn't take AP US history versus, what they took instead, right? That's a way for you to kind of really help advocate for yourself and give that explanation to students or to admission officers from your academics.
Sweet. I'm going to take over here. I'm going to use sharing mode. I don't know if this is working, but I'm trying to do it in Ethan on screen mode, and we'll see if it works. So thank you, Tom. You're the best. Scooting down our list, what do they care about after grades? This thing called positive character attributes. That is so vague and ambiguous. Bro, what does that even mean? So it's basically are you a nice person? No, I'm kidding. It's basically colleges have specific things, specific qualities that they're all looking for. How do you find out what those things are? That seems really difficult. It seems do colleges even know what they're looking for? Well, we had a podcast interview on this I'll just fast forward to who these folks were. The Making Caring Common project is a project that basically they help colleges figure out what they're looking for. And in interviewing them, I was like, man, it seems like it'd be really tough to figure out what all colleges are looking for. But then I realized, you know what? We did a little research. You can find what some colleges are looking for if you just search for it. So for instance, Caltech, they want students who have a love of math. And I'm going to fast forward through some of these. Show resilience and collaborative spirit and creativity and inclusivity. And I had this idea. I was like, yo, what if we just looked up hundreds of schools' websites and did a little synthesis of what the qualities are that they're looking for? And so we did. And I am about to tell you what some of them are, but I don't want this to become here's what every college looks for, or these are the 5 commandments of what you have to have in your application, or else you're going to not get into schools. It's not that way. It's more like what we call admission nutrients, which is to say, I think Tom you put it really well when you talked about if you put these qualities in your application, nobody's going to be mad at you. No college admission officer is going to be like, nah, we don't want that. So here are some of the things that when we did our research, hundreds of colleges look for. Things like intellectual curiosity. What are you a nerd for and how does it manifest in your life? Service to others. How do you look beyond yourself? Help the world, help your community, help your family. Leadership and initiative both came up. So there's leadership in the sort of obvious ways. I'm president of this club, or I founded this thing. Or initiative, where on a particular project did you take the lead? Did you jump in where help was needed? Collaboration. Now this is one that students I think sometimes forget about. You show yourself as an awesome human who does awesome stuff in the world, but how are you learning from others and being changed and shaped by them? That's super important. Sometimes I'll look at an awesome application and be like, something's missing. And oftentimes it's collaboration, consistent engagement. So not like I started these things only my senior year, but there have been things that you've been involved with over a couple of years. Colleges love to see it. Fortunately, these are things that aren't just things that colleges want, but based on our research, they're also qualities that employers are looking for. Yes, even in an AI landscape. I wasn't going to say landscape. I was anyway. And what gives life meaning? Like all of these are qualities that, based on if you look at the PERMA model or something, are qualities that will contribute to your life. So that's why I feel mostly good about being like, here are some qualities that would be good to pursue in your college application because I think they're going to help you have a more meaningful, purposeful life. Okay, we're back to this positive character attributes. Underneath that, we've got essays and writing sample. So how important are essays? Well, it depends on how selective the schools that you're applying to are. So if the schools that you're applying to are not that selective, so they've got like higher than a 50% admit rate, yes, they're looking for skills, qualities, values, and interests. They're looking for some new information, but it's not probably going to be the difference maker. It's when you get more selective that they're starting to look for things like, am I truly compelled by this applicant? And when you get really selective, is this student connecting with one of our institutional priorities? So institutional priorities are specific things that it's hard to know what the college is looking for. It's hard to find these, but it's specific things that, and I'm not going to get into those today. That's a whole separate session. We'll do that in a couple months. But more and more, I'll say the essays matter for differentiating you for students who have similar profiles at selective schools. So let me slow down and say that again. Essays matter most when, let's say, you're applying to a selective school and they're trying to tell you and a student who has a similar profile, similar grades, test scores if you submitted them, similar extracurricular activities apart. And that's when essays really start to matter. So yeah. How do I start? This is February. This is not the time to be starting your essays probably because you're going to be rewriting them. But we think that like there are some cool light brainstorming exercises that you can find all over our YouTube channel and just Google brainstorming exercises, college essay guy. But we feel like summer is the time to really begin in earnest. Right now is the time to be thinking about developing your college list, thinking about summer plans, exploring potential majors. And then my hope for you is that over the summer, that's when you're really focused on writing your applications, your personal statement, your activities list, additional info. I would love it if most students were done by October 31st. That's many students, focus on that for early decision, early action applications. I love it when students get other essays done for other schools that they're applying to, so they don't have to like ruin their, winter break if they don't get into their early schools. We've got a free guide to the personal statement that Diana, thank you, will share in the chat if you want to take a look at that. But, for me, this is like not the time to be like, you need to write your essay in February. It's more like, just putting it on your radar. Demonstrated interest. I'm gonna stay your Vanna White here, Tillie, and let you be the awesome voiceover. And I have to stop sharing and then restart sharing because then I'm not in that like, there we go, content only mode. There we go.
There we go. Awesome. Okay, so demonstrated interest, folks, is exactly what it sounds like. How do you demonstrate your interest in a college? And they are tracking this. Not every school is tracking it. Many are. And essentially what it is a touch point with them, right? It is a way that colleges are trying to distinguish whether or not you're actually interested, right? They're really trying to predict if you're going to attend based on how much you're interacting with them. And some colleges really care about this, some don't care at all. Some are tracking it down to whether you open emails or their newsletters or are you going to their college fairs. And that's a little creepy, which is true, right? But it's sort of part of the game playing of it. But it's not really a game, right? They want to see if they're going to offer you admission. Are you really more likely to attend? So it's a strategy that they're using, and it's typically, you're not going to see it in the most selective colleges, right? Like Ivy Leagues are not doing that. UCs are not doing that. But those that are sort of tend to also be selective, right, are generally using it as a tool. And a great place to find it is the common data set. And this is a great place to find a lot of information, but you can literally just Google common data set Purdue or common data set Pitts or College, and check out section C7, the level of the applicant's interest. So we actually have on the next slide, we're going to show you what that looks like. So you'll see here you've got a couple columns. This is for Bates. And we've got very important, considered, not considered. And our recommendation is that if you check out the common data set and the colleges on your list have anything above considered, right? So unless they're saying explicitly they don't consider it, see the level of applicants' interest, so it's circled there for you, then you really should take it fairly seriously, right? So let's take a look at how to do that, because not everybody can afford to visit campus, right? Which is if you're taking an official college tour, going to the info session, maybe doing an interview on campus, you're definitely demonstrating interest in that way, but we can't do that for every school, and some people don't have that luxury. So what are a bunch of ways? I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can take a look at the slide, but some of the big ones, right, are if a college rep is visiting your campus, and you can usually sign up for these on Naviance or Score or Maya if you have those at school. That's a big one. It's also an opportunity to have a conversation potentially with the person reading your application. You can email your admission officer. This was a question we got in the chat, right? If you have a compelling, interesting question, we don't want you to put something that you can find easily on the website. That's not a great move, right? Or signing up for their mailing list or newsletters, then you're tracked in the system. Contacting student ambassadors, right? Or student admission reps. Doing optional essays, engaging on social media in some cases. There's so many ways, right? Doing the interview if that's optional, right? Or given to you. And I still have written thank you notes from when I was an admission officer that I kept, that I loved, that meant so much. So don't discount the importance of the handwritten note, people, especially in the age when nobody gets snail mail. There are really cool stamps out there, so go for it. Okay, let's keep going. So summer plans, right? This is a question we get all the time. And here's the deal, everybody. If there was like the golden ticket summer thing to do, we would tell you what it is, right? Like, I promise. And so would colleges. But the beauty is, and this is great news, is that there really are a lot of different ways to spend your summer that are all seen as valuable, right, for colleges, and they're ways that can give you ease and be purposeful and be joyful, right? You don't have to cough up thousands of dollars for impressive summer experiences. Some of them that have big brand names aren't even put on by the folks at those big Ivy Leagues, right? Some of those are really quite useful if there's something you're interested in, but colleges are not heavily preferencing one over the other, right? So I want you to think about the impact. What skills are these going to build? What goals do you have for yourself? Remember how in our survey we're asking you about what goals you have for yourself? Are there specific goals, right? I'm working with a student right now who really wants to work on her journalism and her writing, right? And so we're working on maybe preparing an op-ed or something like that, but she also wants to do a ton of reading. So we're going to put a reading list together, and that's fantastic, right? But you want to think about new experiences, skills you want to build, goals you have, and think about the impact over the name brand, right? And also remember, balance is key. Burnout doesn't help anybody, so you want to build in that time too for rest and relaxation, particularly juniors, because you're heading into senior year, you're heading into this intensity, and it is a lifelong skill to build that balance and find a way to rest, and that is just as valuable as the work that we do. Okay. Let's talk rec letters, everybody. So these are a key component of the applications. I have written many of these, and I have read many rec letters, right? And the way to understand it, you've got your counselor letters and your teacher letters. The teacher letter is this zoomed in perspective on who you are in the classroom, right? Whereas the counselor letter is talking about you in the context of the school community. They're painting a broader picture, right? And they are, maybe your teacher is your coach or an advisor in some capacity that can speak about you there, but it's sort of that microcosm of who you're going to be in an academic setting versus who you are, and maybe also if there are extenuating circumstances, maybe you got a concussion or you had to make decisions about certain courses, or you've had certain real challenges, right? Your counselor is going to help put those into context. Let's keep going there. So how do we make sure these are great, right? One way is to be really intentional about who you're selecting. So you want teachers who, to the best of their ability, or the best that you can gauge, know you well, right? If you have an English teacher, let's say, who is also your yearbook club advisor, that's somebody who's seen you in multiple contexts, right? Seen you in that leadership, maybe how you're translating those skills from the classroom to a club. So hopefully a teacher who knows you well, right? You really want a teacher from a core academic subject. If you're applying to arts programs or things like that, then typically they will want a third recommendation, and that could come from like an arts or theater teacher, but you generally want them to come from those core subjects that Tom talked about earlier. And you usually want to see teachers from more recent school years. So I usually say you want somebody from junior year, or let's say you had a 10th grade math teacher who's also going to teach you senior year. That can be a great person to choose who's seen you evolve and grow, right? We know too, folks, if you're coming from big public schools, sometimes you're in class with 40 people. I think there were 40 people in my calc class when I was in high school, right? So there are ways to help your teachers get to know you if you don't have the luxury of being in a small class. So Ethan, let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about that.
Got it.
So here's the thing. You don't have to use these recommendation letters, right, to prove how well-rounded you are, right? It's really just think about which teachers can represent who you are, your growth, skills you've built, things you've achieved, right? You can't stress about what they're going to say about you. You don't know, you don't get to see that. You can, for this part of the process. Also, I'm just telling everybody, it is so rare for an application to make it or break it. I've never seen, I don't think, an example, maybe once, but not even, of a letter being a reason a kid didn't get into school, right? All it's going to do is really help and paint the picture. Huge pro tip, and this comes from somebody who's reading these applications, do not send more letters than they request. This is not like a sundae where I want every imaginable topping on there and more is better. This ain't it. No, do not send, yes, I'd eat the 5 maraschino cherries. Do not send 5 extra letters, right? They are gauging whether or not you can follow directions. And then as the reader, when let's say I'm trying to get through 15, 20 applications a day, if we've asked you, just send me 2 and then you send me 10 extra ones, I literally, as a human, get frustrated reading them. We just want you to send what we've asked you. So please remember that. Alrighty, next slide, please. So here's the way to make sure, particularly if you are in a big school and you maybe don't feel like you know your teachers are as well, or you're a quieter student, you can help them recall those special moments, right? Maybe there's a project that you did really well on, or a topic that you absolutely loved and it caused you to go do another outside project or something, or maybe it's led you to the major that you want to do because of this experience you had in their class. You can send them, whether it's through like a formal, sometimes schools will say, here's a brag sheet for teachers, or teachers will ask you to fill out something or send them your resume, but you can send them bullet points and reminders, right, of meaningful things in their class. As I said, projects, points of pride where you felt like, oh, you were really struggling with a particular unit and then you had your light bulb moment, or maybe it was because you went to office hours, right? And some small stories can help too, folks. This is what we mean by vignettes, right? Where it's all a story, right? This whole piece of your application, we're telling a story. And so there's a particular moment, right, where you got up in class and you have horrible, stage fright, but you delivered this fantastic presentation on the Industrial Revolution, and that inspired you to be a history major. I don't know what, right? But if there was that moment where everybody stood up and clapped for you, and it was the deepest you've ever understood, meat processing plants. I'm getting off here. You know what I mean? Like
the jungle, right?
Those vignettes, if you have just those brief stories, can bring you to life, right? And also if there's interplay between maybe your science class and history, etc., it can really help elevate it. Alrighty. And then, I think that was it. Standardized tests.
I'll just say a minute on this. I think it's the last slide before handing it back to Ethan, so we can just keep it for whoever's sharing. Standardized testing, as Ethan shared and Tillie shared earlier, at most colleges, this has become a deprioritized part of the way that they evaluate applications. Many of you tuning into the call, and we know this because we've done many webinars like this, and I've polled our audience, are interested in highly selective colleges, which you may have heard lots of headlines and news and buzz about many schools, including most Ivy League schools, I believe, other than Columbia, returning to required standardized testing. So if you are aiming to apply to highly selective colleges, those are schools, in my opinion, I'd say any school that has like a less than 30% admit rate are ones that would be considered more highly selective. This may be something that you want to invest time and energy and investment in, especially if you historically have been a strong test taker. It can be an additive component to your application if you perform well. But just like I said with classes and transcripts and high school context, standardized test scores are evaluated in context as well. So if you are a student coming from a really well-resourced, really kind of high-powered suburb, say like the California Bay Area, where lots of students are heading to selective colleges, many of them, have been involved in test prep for a long time. The person in admissions will be looking at your score in context with a lot of other high-scoring students. And that doesn't mean that you not taking it or choosing to spend your time and energies elsewhere, like leadership or initiative or service to others or those admission nutrients that Ethan mentioned before. Those are great ways to spend your time if testing is not something that you feel as confident in. But if you're a student who's coming from an environment that is not as well resourced, where not as many students are going on to four-year colleges, and the highest score, in your high school historically is a 1400 on the SAT, and you reach close to that, even though at some schools that would be a lower score in their reported averages, in your immediate context, you are achieving really, really high levels of an anomalous success with this one particular metric. But I want to de-emphasize just the hyperfixation on test scores for all of you on the call, because as someone who worked in admissions for many years at highly selective colleges, this is something that students and families stress more about, I would argue, than is warranted. Especially students who already have reached a really high score, say something, 1500 on the SAT or above, a 32 on the ACT, and they're chasing the 1550 or the 34 or 36. That can sometimes be a hamster wheel of just chasing really minimal points overall in a grand scheme of an application that isn't really making all that much of a difference in how your application is read.
Sweet. Thanks. I'm gonna share this screen. It's the same one, but next slide. Hi. We did the things. Let's share some free resources, shall we? There we go. Oh, that's why I clicked the wrong thing. You think I'd done this before, but no, never. I've never shared my screen before. Let me share this one. Here we go. Okay, there we go. So free resources. Here we go. We've got this podcast series that I mentioned that y'all can check out. We start with David Hawkins, who did the series. He dives into the high level, and then we get into all these different elements. But this was sort of like the truncated version of we did 1 to 5 minutes on each one. Each one of these is like a 45-minute, odyssey into all these different elements of the things that we just talked about. So if you're looking for more than 7-ish tips, I don't know how many we actually gave, feel free to check it out. And that's wherever fine podcasts are heard, Spotify, all the places. We've also got a ton of resources on what's called our application hub. So if you're trying to figure out, what your college list is, or if you're trying to figure out what scholarships, how those work, we've got a ton on our college application hub. And like I mentioned earlier, we've got this amazing program called the Matchlighter Scholars Program. So if you are a low-income student and you're interested in one-on-one support, we have an amazing cohort of, well, it's more than a cohort. Cohort's kind of quaint. It's like a giant community of amazing counselors. Maybe some of you on the call are in that community, who work one-on-one with students for 10 hours of free support, no strings attached, as long as you financially qualify. We'd love to support you. So stay tuned to that page because we're getting ready to open up that pretty soon. We've got videos coming out pretty regularly. Tom and Tillie and I are recording the new basically the new season of YouTube videos right now. We're working on those scripts actively. Tom is active on our Instagram account, so you can check us out there. Besides that, I mentioned we have Pay What You Can courses that we do over the summer, live and on-demand courses that are in, the writing your personal statement, creating your supplemental essays. We also do one-on-one stuff. Like I mentioned, we've got one-on-one essay coaching, and some folks don't know that we also do college counseling. So if you're trying to figure out what schools you're applying to, say you don't have a counselor, maybe trying to figure out your major, how to explore majors or what to do this summer, You're trying to figure out, okay, which schools should I demonstrate interest to? All the things that we've been talking about. We're happy to support you. We've got cool counselors who've got lots and lots of college knowledge because we've got the spreadsheets to show for it, and just an incredibly experienced crew. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out. We've got some cool exercises like this one that isn't one that we have shared a lot publicly, but it's a really good one. Tom put this one together. So here we are at Q&A, and we're going to give away some books. So Diana, if you wouldn't mind, maybe throwing in the chat the names of our book winners. We usually just pick folks at random for the book giveaway, and we'll also do some Q&A for a few minutes here. So feel free to throw questions into the Q&A box. We've tried to answer a few along the way. I think we've done an okay job. We've answered something like 40. Um, Let me see if there's anything coming in. I'm looking for questions that are questions that maybe a lot of people um, are wondering about. Sometimes the questions get super niche.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say most of the questions have been about course choices and options, which is good because you were listening to my section and it is probably the most important thing you can do to improve your chances. That's a situation where we try to do free webinars like this to get, as much insight and advice out there. But again, remember, there's a lot of you tuning in from lots of different environments, high schools, unique circumstances. Definitely, if you can invest in it, meeting with your school counselor is definitely a first step. Because they're going to know your individual high school context the best, more than anyone, because that's their job, that's where they work. But definitely want to make a plug for what Ethan was sharing about college counseling and that support from College Essay Guy. We obviously do a lot of work with students on their essays and the written application components, but course choices and strategies is definitely something that people like Tillie and myself, who this is part of our jobs, really love to help dive into that with families because it can be really complicated. So we know that and want to help out if we can.
are you seeing any? I'm curious. Are you seeing any questions? Thank you, Tom. Any questions, Tilly, that are um, repeating besides score or course stuff?
Something about college fit.
Yeah.
Um, and oh, shout out for Susan Tree. Yeah.
Yay.
Um, so how, yeah, I mean that was one that I think could potentially apply in terms of tips for narrowing down your college list. If either of you guys want to take that one or yeah, those are that's one that's a little more general.
Sure. For narrowing down tips, you said tips for narrowing down the college list?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the resources that I let me just pull up our old essay tracker here. So here's an essay tracker. This is a resource that's on our list building guide. And you notice that here for wildcard, which is like less than 10% chance of getting in, you notice I'm keeping that kind of small here. Of course, what students do is they insert rows and they're like, well, I'm going to put more wildcards here. But in terms of this, my advice is to have four or five that are in reach. And by reach, I mean like let's say 30% or less. Maybe is sort of like broadly speaking, general acceptance, like 35 to 65, and likely is like greater than a 65% chance of acceptance. And most students, when you just look at this, it does a thing to your brain and you go, OMG, most of my schools are wild card. So before I even answer the question with students, like, how do I narrow down my list? Oftentimes, it depends on where your schools are chunked. And for many students, they're chunked up here. And so probably what many students need to do is like actually add more schools that are more in the likely range because I really want y'all to have a few of these in each of these categories because y'all, your anxiety level will drop as soon as you get some likely schools that you are like legit excited about. And if you think of these as foundational and like if you get into these, okay, great. And then you're kind of working your way up from that. That's different from like if I get into Stanford, I'm happy, and if I don't, I'm sad. So I would say start with that. So start with like getting a few schools in each of these, and maybe it's like, I don't know, six or seven. Sorry, that was for my daughter. But then once you're trying to whittle it down, ask yourself, okay, what are the most important things to me? Like, is it prestige? Or is it something like, I don't know, where is a school that has a particular program that I'm looking for? Because that could end up being the thing that sways you and pulls you in a particular direction. Or is it, your geography? Is it, the place where you want to study? There's so much that we could say about this, and I'm doing like a B minus job of doing it quickly. Um, but in terms of narrowing it down, I want y'all to get to like 4 or 5 of each of those in each of those categories. Um, yeah, that's what I'll say about narrowing down the list. And I think I gave advice on like that you should actually expand your list is what happened. Um, let's
And we did
see.
get a good question about, aren't those likely target reaches subjective? Well, they're entirely individualized, right, to that student. So, yes, you want to make somebody else's likelies may not be your likelies, and so that's why spending a lot of time on that part of the process and having a good counselor on your corner, using tools that are available to you like Naviance or scattergrams is really helpful. And it's imperfect, right? Like we can't know. That's why we're talking about those trends and maybe some southern schools moving from the maybes to the reaches, et cetera. But we get very specific with the students because it can change depending on your major. It can change depending on which classes you've taken. It can change depending on, all kinds of things. So it
Yeah.
should be quite tailored to you.
And if y'all are like, well, I don't know what my percentage chance is, just go with general acceptance rates just for ease. And if you're not sure if it's a reach or a maybe, call it a reach. Because I'd rather you default to sort of like the higher, more difficult
Yes.
one, so that you're more like, I would rather you be more delightfully surprised than sorely disappointed. If you were like, what? That was in my likely, list and then totally freak out. So if it's kind of borderline for you, move it up into the higher category would be my advice. Um, do you need to take oceanography? Absolutely. Absolutely, you need to take oceanography. I'm kidding.
Well, I
Um,
just wrote no, so we're giving very conflicting signals here. You don't need to take it.
oh my gosh,
But
what
here's
high school offers oceanography? That's amazing.
There are some. Hey, there's fish
yeah.
aquaculture classes out there,
Oh my
Cathedral High
gosh.
School. You never
They
know.
did not offer that at Southwest Miami Public High School. That's so cool, Ryan, that you got to potentially take oceanography. And I think Tom's advice is, yeah. I don't know. Ethan said you definitely should take it. Ethan was joking. Ethan was joking. Um, add last some of the this is fun. All the AIs are telling us to add last minute items before the meeting ends. All right, any last minute items, Tilly and Tom, before the meeting ends? I'm joking. I'm totally joking. Thank you all for being here tonight. We love you. We'll see you on a future webinar. Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button. I'm also joking again. Much love. Thanks y'all for being here. And thanks to Tilly and Tom and Diana. You're the best.
And good luck, everybody. You got this. There's great info out there. Believe in yourselves and have a wonderful Wednesday.